Hey, everybody. So today we have a extremely special, important, just unbelievable episode of the Entrepreneur Expansion with one of the people in the industry that I truly not just admire, I call a friend, a mentor, just a really awesome person in the entrepreneurial space that I've just watched evolve and transform. And Nicole is putting out a book now, and I wanted to bring her on to have open and honest conversations about relationships and specifically about deeper concepts that people don't necessarily want to talk about. Instead of going dancing around the fire, we're going to go through the fire today. And uh, spoiler alert, if you don't know Nicole, there's going to be swearing in this episode. So get fucking ready because it's about to go down. And this is going to, the last time I had Nicole on another show I had, we went so deep down in the rabbit hole that I just know that when you go through this experience today, you're going to come out on the other end a better, more enlightened person. And so this isn't traditional, here's a habit and you're going to go do it type of thing. This is a open, real, honest conversation about the world of relationships. And as a person who is a hypnotherapist and helps people through this type of stuff, I am just really blessed and grateful that she's here to talk about this. So thank you for being here, Nicole.
I'm really looking forward to the conversation. This is a little bit, atypical for me for what we normally talk about on podcasts and, kind of running down the entrepreneurial gambit of how I made $1 million in my first year, right? Is typically
Yep.
what people are interviewing me for. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to talk about, the person I needed to become in order for those things to happen, and the very real sabotage patterns that I had to self-soothe through and completely rewire and completely shift in my brain in order to become this person. And the book that really explores that is not a business book. It's a fictional piece that, is a very challenging narrative around what we're talking about in a relationship, specifically when it comes to a lot of different layers of abuse. And I think that people kind of like to skip the parts that are a little bit dark and twisty, but quite honestly, those are the real conversations that we need to be having in order to help humanity to get to the next level of evolution. We have to be willing to look at the dark side of the staircase. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. When you started this book, when did you start writing the book? Step one.
Step one, I started writing the book when I was on a plane. I was on a plane on my way to Greece, and I was with my, well, now husband, but at the time he was my boyfriend who was going to propose to me in Greece, that I did not know that. And so I was writing out like the chronological pieces. I tend to write on planes. I'm a big writer on planes in general,
Hmm,
but I wrote the first 30,000 words of this book on my phone on a plane on my way to
that's
Greece.
awesome. That's awesome. Like, did you just knowing you now and know how connected you are um spiritually, like do you know where it was coming from? Did you have a sense of like, because writing a book like this on a plane isn't what most people do. Most people tune out, they watch the fucking TV and they're just like, get me through the flight. You started creating a massively transformational book on a plane. Like that doesn't, most people don't do that. So is there more understanding now currently where you're at and your current understanding of how things evolved as to like why this came through then?
I mean, this was nearly exactly a year after I quit drinking. And just to give everybody in the room a little context, this was about
Mm,
9 months before I started a business that would make $1 million in its first year. And
mm.
so, my boyfriend at the time, we'd been together for all of 4 months, Matt, right?
Yeah.
So all of 4 months. And, he was really the culmination of me getting out of abusive relationships. And so, like, this to me was a story that needed, for me, like, I needed to be able to tell it. I needed to be able to construct it in such a way where it wasn't about me, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
even though it's a fiction piece, like a lot of the scenes in this book are actually real. Like now it takes things in a bigger, more whimsical pattern and like, an exaggerated pattern to show more of the depth. I mean, it didn't get as far as the story goes in real life, but the beginning phrases of every one of these scenes is true, is real. And so
Mm.
this was for me, a big journey in processing as I was preparing to enter this healthy relationship and be in this healthy relationship. I felt like these were things that I needed to like extract, like literally from my fucking bloodstream, right? Like I
Yeah.
needed to get this out of my blood. And I didn't know that I was going to be proposed to at this time, right? I didn't know where this relationship would lead. Like we've now been together for 6 years, and this is, the first really healthy, happy relationship I've ever been in. After a string of really poor ones, and so unbeknownst to me, I was kind of dumping, right? Like I was pulling out,
Yeah.
like creating space for a healthy relationship. I didn't know that at the time, but the characters that evolved from this were a little bit of a coping mechanism to put
Mm.
this pain into somebody else that isn't me, to externalize it, to be able to dissect it from different angles and really be able to self-evaluate, to make different choices in my life, which ultimately those choices turned out really well in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways. But it foundationally started with me changing the way that I treat myself. Because though, I mean, this is the challenge of the novel is that we tend to want to believe that there's a bad guy and a good guy, right? I think that makes us all
Mm.
feeling. We've watched the hero's journey our whole life. We watch Disney and
Yeah.
Pixar, and there's a bad guy and there's a good guy. But when you're in a domestic violence relationship, it's easy for the external world to vilify that person that hit you. But the fact of the matter is the person that put you into an abusive relationship wasn't that person. It was
Mm.
you. And like, I really needed to own that. The fact that I consistently, repetitively put myself in harm's way over and over again, that wasn't about how a partner was treating me. That was about how I was treating me. And I needed to be able to change that. And I couldn't
Yeah.
do it internally. I needed to externalize the characters to be able to break them down, like psychology based wise, to be able to learn how to make different choices.
Do you feel like you're one of the first people I've heard consciously out loud say that I was part of the culmination of this abusive relationship. Not a lot of people will take ownership in that. And this is something that I have a lot of my clients go through as to how their early childhood stuff that occurred in their life led to the later, behaviors, limiting belief patterns, all of this stuff that occurs uh, outward, and they don't realize that they're part of the external creation of whatever this thing is. And that's kind of hard, and some people are gonna be pissed about this, right?
Yes.
And the fact that you're talking about it is so fucking important that I guess, is there any insights that you came up as you were dumping into this book around your childhood and your how kind of like some of that may have led to some of these abusive relationships in your inner world?
I
And if
mean,
you're open to going into that today.
of course. I mean, I think it's a very important part of the narrative. And
Yeah.
it's something that, like, I want to preface this because I know it gets people really fucking upset. And so like I want to preface this with the ideology of like it's not your fault, but it is 100% your responsibility. And
Mm.
that to me was one of my biggest shifts away from victimhood because I was born into an abusive situation. My mom is 9 years younger than my dad. My mom was 18 years old when she got pregnant. And if you think about that, like we tend to think of our parents as full-fledged people and like that they
Totally.
have these functioning brains. Like her prefrontal cortex wasn't even fucking formed yet,
No.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
18-year-olds, I mean, it's almost like having it's almost like having a stick in your head, right? Being
Yeah.
18, like, straight through the ear hole. You don't know what the
Did a
fuck's
nail
going on.
sticking out of her head type of thing? Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, she was 18 years old and found
Yeah.
herself in an abusive relationship, with what society will paint as a monster. And I mean, it's an accurate portrayal, is that, my biological father hit her, he strangled her. He raped her and did terrible things to her, and when she was very young and did not have the ability or the coping mechanisms or the support system. I mean, her parents were very good people. You know what I'm saying? Is like sometimes these things happen to people who don't have a reason for it in the sense of it came through their childhood. And so, like, my grandparents were very good people. They didn't know how to support her through abuse because it wasn't part of their narrative, right? So she
Mm,
didn't have the tools and the people. And, this was the 80s. Like, you
totally.
didn't talk about that shit. You
Nope.
you you just didn't because it was going to work out worse for you. And when she did talk about it, it did work out worse for her. And so I was privy to watching this abuse. But this is also someone who molested me as a child. And so, that innocence was taken from me when I was 2 years old. And, to add insult to injury of this is that I didn't know. And so my mom did what an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old would do, and that was the best she could. And so she
Hmm.
decided not to tell me. And so she didn't tell me until I was 21 years old. And so you can understand the mentality of both sides of that fence, right? Is like that she decided this because she thought it was what was best and that I wouldn't remember anyways. And so she didn't want me
Sure.
growing up with that stigma, of course, right? But the damage of
Oh,
that
totally.
lie, the damage of that lie, and the years and years of the lie, I mean, essentially left me at 21 years old having a new baby myself with no parents, right? Because
Yeah.
now I knew that this person was a monster. My dad was this monster. And now I also knew that my mom was the person that lied to me. So I was left parentless whilst having, I mean, my son I had when I was 20. So my son was, 6 months old when I found this out, which of course you can understand was absolutely fucking devastating. And
Hmm.
I didn't know what to do with those feelings, and I didn't have the support, and I didn't have the structure that I needed to process that or work through it.
Yeah.
And I did the best that I could with that, which of course was not good enough. And so I began to play out these narratives with abusive partners after I found out. I actually didn't experience abuse before I knew, which is something that I think, is tough to trifle with and like tough to kind of battle in my own psyche is like, would it have been better if she had never told me, right? And like we'll never know that, right? So it's a very interesting kind of
Yeah.
butterfly effect moment.
Absolutely. And I want listeners to understand like the things that Nicole's sharing right now. I just want to thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable because this is the type of stuff that needs to be talked about as somebody who has gone to these places with people at a very deep level. I actually started to realize how common um, child abuse is. It's especially in family child abuse, and it is it's something that's not talked about. But like you said, I, I I'm a big believer that once the seed is planted. And I mean, I've had people, they go back to the womb and they can hear and they have experiences. And that starts it all. So this, I think, was just more of a ticking time bomb type of situation. And your mother telling you brought it from the subconscious and it just kind of brought it forwards. And the thing about it though is that you had a choice then, right? Like you had a choice of what do I do with this information? And it did create because the ripple effect of that, it's a lot to digest. That's a lot to take in for any age person, right? But you're still 21. I mean, we're not even really adults then. We think we are, but we're not. And you are then stepping into this okay, this happened to me. What does that mean? And it created in the moment, things got worse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, things got significantly worse from that point moving forward. And like, because you view yourself differently, right? It's like the things that you think you know are instantly redefined. And I had already kind of created this narrative with my biological father, who was no longer in my life, by the way. I mean, she did get me away from him, and like he did, kind of chase us to the ends of the earth, and we had to go through all of that kind of bullshit, right? But eventually, like the courts did support her eventually, right? It took
Yeah.
longer than it fucking should have, but the courts did eventually support her. And so I hadn't seen my dad in a long time. And the last interaction that I had had with him was inviting him to my high school graduation, to which this was my last ditch effort at creating a relationship with him. And then, of course, he told me he was going to be there. And I'm sure you can guess what happened, right? Is that he didn't show up. And so it reinforced that abandonment pattern. And from
Of
that
course.
moment of being 17 years old, I said, never will I ever. I will never
Yeah.
have a relationship with this person. You have missed your chance, the end. And I literally never talked to him again, right? Like I
Hmm.
would run into him in certain constructs. We live in a small town. And I do not give him, still to this day, I do not give him the time of day. He is a stranger to me. And, that was before I knew. And so I definitely had a narrative in my head of like how strong I was that I could make this decision at 17, and that I was going to write this motherfucker off. And like that, I was not going to live my life chasing after my daddy dreams. And like I was very
Yeah.
solid in that. Um, but that really shook me to find those things out, because it made me perceive myself so much differently. And, that's the responsibility piece, right? That was not my fault, but it was my responsibility to go and seek the resolution of this, and to seek processing, and to seek support, and to seek help to go through all of this. Because I had a child, and it was
Hmm.
not okay for me to do what I did, which was drink it away. That was not okay. That was not the best decision for me. That was not the best decision for my child. And even though I was 21 and I was young, I still knew better, and I still could have done better, and I didn't. And that led to, a lot of self-abuse in the inside to make that make sense, to that then called in external abuse to make the inside match the outside, which is what we do in
Hmm.
creating congruency and safety within the patterns of our lives, is that whatever we have inside is what we call in on the outside. Again,
Yep.
not my fault, but 100% my responsibility.
Yeah. And for the people that are hearing you right now say what you're saying around it's not your fault and it's your responsibility, what would you say to them if they had the question, like, well, how do I take ownership of this and become responsible of this? What do I do, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, the actionable step of this is really at first allowing yourself to feel your feeling. And that is fucking scary, and it's fucking hard. And, this is exactly why I started drinking, right? It's like I went to the drinking, I went to the drugs, I went to the bad dudes to
Numbing. Yeah.
avoid the feeling,
Yep.
right? Because the feeling was crippling, it was paralyzing. But now, knowing what I know now and helping people the way I help people, when people do, I mean, it's not hypothetical, people do come to me and ask me this, the first step of this is you got to sit down and you got to feel that feeling. And you've got to say that feeling out loud, and you've got to let yourself feel it in your body. And you got to validate that feeling for yourself. You've got to really know that that feeling is valid, is valuable, and it is contributing to your human experience, because the whole point of being human is to feel your feelings. And so, in taking radical responsibility, it's not saying, oh, I should have prevented this as a 2-year old, right? Or a
Yeah.
21-year-old. It's saying, I do have feelings, and that radical responsibility is for feeling your feelings, not controlling your circumstances.
Mm, totally. Yeah. It's when we dance around the fire, folks, and we don't go through it, we stay in these numbing patterns, and it's avoidance behavior. And I mean, people go to their grave with this stuff. So they can keep repeating these patterns, and it's affecting all areas of their life. When sitting down and actually experiencing it, saying it out loud, going through this process, it's the processing of it. Like I explain with my clients, it's like a lot of us have this filing cabinet in our head, right? And a lot of the files are just all over the freaking place, and there's crumbled up paper thrown in there. And we've never taken this stuff out and actually processed this shit. We haven't processed it. We're pouring alcohol in it. We're pouring drugs. We're putting drugs in front of it. We're scrolling on social media. We're numbing ourselves because feeling that feeling and stepping into it feels extremely uncomfortable and very unsafe to the subconscious mind. And so one of the things that you're saying here is that it's our responsibility to open this up so that you can heal. Is that what you're saying?
Ultimately, like it is the human condition to feel the feelings, and everything that we do to avoid that, it goes against the very essence of human nature,
Yeah,
right? And like that's where if you want to put in, you want to put in the construct of the devil or whatever, right?
sure.
Insert your villain here. The villain in this life is everything that takes away our sensation of being alive. And that
Mm,
includes doom scrolling and drugs and drums and rock and roll and just avoiding the feeling of what it is to experience this. But like you said, we don't feel safe to do this. And so, I think that in the domestic violence narrative, we talk about the villain being the abuser. And that is a very normal thing to say. But the fact of the matter is that the villain is systemic. The villain
mm,
is not either side of that person. It's not the wife or the husband, right? The villain is a society that supports the numbing. It's a society that makes it unsafe for us to express our feelings, to have challenging conversations like this because it's so, taboo that we're not allowed to talk about it, that we're not allowed to feel it or experience it or admit it or normalize it in such a way that we would deal with it sooner. I mean, how many stories, I mean, I know from my clients, thousands of stories of abuse that not
totally.
only happened, but were left unchecked, right?
Totally.
That were denied and swept under the rug because that in itself is a numbing effect of a parent not wanting to, or not having the capabilities, or not feeling safe to have this conversation with their child. And ultimately, that does more damage than good. And it is our responsibility to change that narrative
Yeah,
and to stop sweeping abuse under the rug and making it something that is a shame-ridden thing that, you know, never gets talked about because that's exactly what makes it continue.
totally. And there's so many different kinds of trauma, folks, and there's a lot of this is just handed down trauma, right? It's generation to generation like the thing is on this plane that you're right in this book, you're literally breaking generational cycles of trauma for the future, right? Not just for you, but you. I mean, this book's going to save some people's lives. Let's be real. And there's just so much to this. This is where, like, when I was in the health world, when I, especially in 2010, when I got into owning a gym and I opened it up, I was like, why do people get results and can't keep them? Why do some people never get results? How come they can't release this weight? And what I learned is that a lot of the weight is mental and emotional weight, and they're wearing a fat suit to keep them protected from the external world. I'm telling y'all, like it is a real thing. And when you can actually release that stuff, a lot of times the body weight starts to fall off as well. And so everything Nicole is sharing here is part of this puzzle. So here we are writing this book. You're releasing patterns at 30,000 feet in the air, writing 30,000 words, and you are letting it all out there. You're about to be proposed by a new relationship. Can I ask you, because I've met your husband, awesome dude, what allowed you from the abusive relationships? What do you think, because you hadn't written this book yet, what allowed you to accept this new awesome man that actually wasn't abusing you and loving you? Like, what allowed you to move into that and accept that? Because some people have trouble accepting that they're good enough for this new person. Do you know what I mean?
I definitely had trouble accepting that I would be good enough for anybody. And so this wasn't like, I know a lot of people tell a story about one abusive relationship. For me, it was repetitive abusive relationships and honestly kind of exploring, different words associated with abuse, different angles of abuse, where there was physical abuse, there was financial abuse, there was narcissistic abuse, kind of coming in all of these different angles, almost like I needed to try them all on, Matt, which is
Mm.
so fucking sabotagey. But like it was that feeling like I needed to go through those experiences. And one of them got, really bad, right? One of them was, one of them I almost did not make it out of, right? And
Mm.
like you don't realize that when you're kind of playing with that fire, you don't realize how quickly that could be taken away from you. I was in a hotel room in Bangkok with this man, and I never should have got on that plane, right? Like I never should have got on that plane because it was so dangerous in that country with him because there's no one coming to save you.
No.
That's not happening in that country. And like the terror of realization of the mistake that I had made in leaving the US and going into a place where women are not like those hotel desk people did not help me. They locked me in the room with him. And there was a moment where he had his hands around my throat and I mean, something stopped him, but it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I had my entire life in his hands, and I had that flash that, oh my God, I'm never going to see my children ever again. Right. And like previous to that, I had two suicide attempts. And it's so crazy that, like, I was so careless with a life that I value so much now. I was so cavalier with that life. And I had two suicide attempts before this one, which in a way kind of was a suicide attempt, right? And in that moment, I realized, oh, I don't want to die. Like, I don't want to leave my kids. Like, I don't want this. And so it's so strange to say it this way, but he gave me such an incredible gift because in
Mm.
that moment, I realized how much I want my life, how much I wanted my children. And so maybe it was that fight that came in that saved me. I don't know. Maybe it was the energetic shift in my heart frequency that
Yeah.
made him stop. But it was very close to not being a thing. And when I came back and got back on American soil, it was like kind of like those movies where you like get off the plane and like kiss the dirt.
Yeah.
I felt so safe in coming home that I had a very sharp realization that I had to get away from this person. And so I started taking the actual steps. I went to the courthouse. I tried to get a restraining order, which I couldn't, by the way, because those things happened in a foreign country. They wouldn't give me
Mm.
a restraining order. It was terrifying. I had to go through so much to get away from this guy. And, one judge is the only reason that like I'm still here. And that judge finally saw through his bullshit because guys, you don't fall in love with guys that punch you on the first date, right? Like this guy was, a beautiful specimen of a human and extremely articulate in court and everybody loved him. Charisma doesn't quite cover it, right? Everybody loved him. And so in that story, he vilified me very well. And so it was very hard for me to get out. And finally, one judge saw through him. And it was my third judge that I had gone to see.
Mm.
So it was extremely hard to break out. And that judge locked him up for 90 days. And that 90 days saved my life. That 90
Yeah.
days gave me the space. But in that 90 days of him being locked up, I got fired from both of my fucking jobs, right? And one of those was kind of like a ripple of shit that he pulled off to get me out of this very lucrative job. So I got fired from both of my bartending jobs, and I was at the rock bottom of rock bottoms because I didn't know what the fuck I was gonna do. And so I did the only thing you can do in that moment. I called my mom, I called my mom, and she was in Bali at that time. And my mom is a very high level Tantra instructor. And so she was facilitating there in Bali. And she said, just get on the plane, Nicole. And like 2 years ago, I never would have done that. I would have been so deep in my addiction and so deep in my self-sabotage patterns, I never would have accepted her help. But it
Mm.
was so raw and so real. And I was so afraid that I did. I got on the plane and I went back to Asia, of all fucking places, right? I go back over there, right? And I got back on the plane and went back to Bali and had this experience with my mom where I really connected and really kind of like stripped away all the things. And she helped me through a very tumultuous like ceremony, this water ceremony where like we were with the Balinese people. One of her friends is a Balinese princess, strange enough. And so
Wow.
we got into this kind of water tower place and we did this water ceremony and I got so sick. I was just deathly ill, and the Balinese people were telling me that I was releasing a demon, right? And so they were helping
Mhm.
me to shed this demon in like these kind of smokestacks of I don't even know what the hell they were doing, right? But it all culminated in me being on a beach with my mom and her helping me to put all of my worthlessness, like the feeling of worthlessness and all of the ripple of that worthlessness into this little tiny white flower. And then I put that white flower into the ocean and I released it. And for the first time in my life, I felt quiet. Like I could
Mm.
feel like the nothing. Like that was the first time I ever felt space in my mind. And that space that was created in releasing the worthlessness forever changed my chemistry. It just changed the way my brain operated. It rewired something inside of me so deep and so intrinsic that when I came back, I got on the plane and like I just felt so different. And I started drawing again and I haven't drawn in years. And I started drawing and like creating. And when I got back, I got on Hinge. Like I can still remember who the fuck told me to get on this dating app, right? But I got on this dating app, kind of out of like, just boredom and dopamine hit needing things, right?
Sure.
And Daniel was the only person I met on Hinge. He was my
Interesting.
first match, and he was in a city nearby me about an hour and a half away, and we overlapped because I was up snowboarding, right? And so we overlapped for just that one ping. And it was the best 3 days of my life having those text messages back and forth and just somebody who was completely different to anybody I'd ever met. And it was just such a raw, real experience of just not the normal dating rigmarole, right? Like I was just being exactly who the fuck I really was and saying the first thing that popped in my mind because I had all this mental space and this mental clarity and I was just exercising it for the very first time. And when we met, like, I mean, our first date is like out of a movie. I mean, it's like absolutely perfect. And like it just all happened so fast because I changed my entire energetic frequency and called in the one with the
Yeah.
peace.
I was
And
just gonna say, like, I feel like just the energetic shift that you had there made it and if this is not a shout out to energetic shifts, like it like made it like possible for that encounter to occur. Like people don't understand how important that was. I mean, literally you just explained what I mean, would you consider the first part of that story the rock bottom? I mean, it sounds like you're rock bottom. Would you say that was rock bottom?
yeah, I mean, I've had two suicide attempts, and to me, that moment was way scarier than holding the gun in my hand.
Yeah, it's almost like at that moment, your lowest standards, your lowest boundaries were crossed, and you were like, it's time to wake the fuck up. And then you go and have this experience in Bali and just had literally like this energetic shift that made it possible to create a different reality. So you jumped timelines in a sense, um, in a really powerful way. So here you are now. How long did you date Daniel before he did propose? Like how long before you're on this flight writing this book?
I mean, 4 whole months.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, but that's cool because he must have experienced it too. Like, and we're not gonna put his laundry out into this podcast as well, but I'm assuming that this was for him to after 4 months to be like, she's the one, I'm in. Like, he probably had to feel really certain, right, that this is the person, and like that's a lot to put yourself out there. I remember how shaky I was asking my wife to marry me. Like that shit's nerve-wracking, and like, she was like, I got to her house to propose to her and she was like, oh, I did MASH last night. They played like the little kid game MASH and like,
Yeah.
and she was like, oh yeah, we're gonna get married and have a kid. I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, how does she know this is about to go down? But it's like, so he's in this space where he energetically knows that you're the one. You are open to actually receiving this. This is a big key piece here, y'all. This never goes down unless you're open to receiving. This book never gets started being written until you're open to receive the book, right? And open to receiving this. It's really, you just started feeling like you were enough to live.
Yeah. I mean, and for the first time in my life felt safe. I mean, like, which is such a weird thing. I mean, obviously I had moments of safety as a child and like, of course, right? But like as an adult in a relationship, this was the first time I ever felt safe and supported, cared for, loved, and actually seen who I really was, right? Because it was the first time that I was being who I
Yeah.
really was. Like that wasn't the fault of the partners before him. I was masking the entire time. I was trying to be what they wanted me to be and immensely suffering for it. And, trying to kind of stuff myself into that round peg square hole feeling. And this was the first time that I was myself and honest. And I think that was so, I mean, I know because he's told me, right? It's like that was so refreshing for him because I just didn't behave like other people. And I think for him, he was definitely in that catalytic moment as well of just really being open to something different than what he had already previously experienced within relationship.
So you're here, you're on the plane, you're flying, you're writing it out. What do you feel like when you first started writing? What did you think this was going to turn out to be? What did you think you were going to write a fictional novel that you're going to release in 2025? I'm assuming that wasn't like your first inkling. It just kind of fell out of you, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was no intention, right? It was just, I just started writing and it was just
Yeah.
this story that started to evolve and kind of build out. And like, I think that a lot of people, when they have this experience, they create an autobiography, right? Like they
Mm,
create their memoirs. That's definitely what a lot of people have shared with me, right? But for me, that it was never that. Like I started, kind of sculpting this other set of characters and really this set of characters that was kind of explaining this of like why this happened and how these things happen and like not just for me but also for the abusive partners. And so it started to kind of just pour out as like almost a kind of fable-esque energy of like my subconscious needing to make sense of this somehow, needing to like put the dots together in a way that made sense so that I felt safe because I did start to feel safe in my relationship. So I needed the safety to match the inside and the outside, right?
mm,
And these characters gave me an outlet, and I was really only writing for me. I wasn't writing to be read until
yeah.
it turned a certain corner, right? And like after I'd probably about 20 or 30,000 words in kind of thing, like, and like I kind of read it back. You know how you do that for a second, you stop and you read it back and I was like, "Oh, this is something,"
Yeah.
right? And I let Daniel read a chunk of it, right? And he immediately started crying, and he was like, "I can't read this." Get this shit away from
Well,
me, right?
and he's also in the mode. Like I said, he's also
Yeah.
rattled, and you're like trying to hand him this shit, and he's like, "I got things I gotta do." You're really fucking up the vibe.
Yeah. Poor
That's
guy.
amazing. I can feel when you started saying that, I was like, I can feel how he felt. Like I totally get why he cried because it's just like there's a lot. You're not making it easier. But that's amazing that he was open to reading it and taking it in. So obviously he proposes to you. You didn't expect that, right? That was
No,
not
I did
that
not
was
know.
okay.
I don't think
Okay.
people expect 4-month-old proposals, right?
No, no, no. But you said yes.
I did. I did. I mean,
That's
I said
cool.
I said yes, and it was not a question. Right.
Okay, that's awesome. And so when did you get married to him? What was the year you got married to him?
We actually didn't get married for another year and a half because
Okay.
this was COVID,
Yeah, I got
right?
it. Yeah,
So
yeah,
like right when we got back from Greece, like I think we were home for three months when COVID hit. So
yeah.
I mean, then we were in lockdown land for
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, 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 which is crazy. Yeah, I always felt super horrible for all of the women that had weddings like planned that year.
Mhm.
Like that's brutal. Like
Yeah.
it must have been insane. So you took the time to, make sure this was the right thing. That's good. And COVID kind of forced that hand in a sense. And so then for those of you that don't know Nicole, mouthy bartender, turned millionaire in her first year. She launched a business. I mean, she's one of the greatest in the game, especially when it comes to I would say experiences. Is one of my favorite things that you do really well. Like you just make it, and when I found out that you were writing a fictional book, I was like, that checks out actually. Like it made sense why your mind did that. Because you do such a great job creating wonderful fictional experiences in a real life way in Wonderworld and just like allowing us to have deeper experiences, which is really cool. So you decided to continue writing this book during COVID, or did you kind of put it away?
I mean, it was a lot of pick it up and put it down,
Got it.
right? It was a lot of that. I ended up hiring a book coach 6, 8 months later because I was kind of getting pigeonholed a little bit into the storylines because in true Nicole fashion, we got to do things the hard way, right? So it was a very complicated storyline where we're covering not a very sequential piece,
Yeah.
because it goes through three different timelines. Okay, so three different sets of time like equivalencies, but the same three souls going through the weave of these three timelines. And it just got to the point where it was kind of bigger than me, right? It was like it's like when you have more kids than parents, right? It's like
It's aggressive. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot. And so I needed a second set of hands on this. And that first book coach was pivotal for me because she gave me what I needed. And I didn't know it at the time, but like I didn't know that this was good. You know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
you don't know if something is good. You have no idea. When it's your baby, it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And so, it could be the ugliest baby in the world and you just don't know.
Sure.
And she read it. And when she read it, she came back to me and she said, "You need to go big five with this. Like, do not self-publish."
Yeah.
And like that changed everything for me, because that's when I realized it was real. And it was like, no, you
Awesome.
need to finish this. This is something that needs to be done. This is something that will be, you can go publish like with real publishers. I didn't end up going big five. I did shop big five a little bit, but I ended up choosing a boutique publisher instead because I wanted to maintain the rights.
Mm,
Because I think that this will be something that, I mean, the goal here and like the evolution here is to get this into some sort of Netflix, Amazon-ish kind of series. And if you go to Big Five, you're done, right?
yeah.
They
Game
they
over.
they own your fucking soul. And
Yeah.
so I decided to opt out of that and go with a boutique publisher instead.
Which actually is really awesome on a lot of levels because you know your worth and you know that this is worth keeping. And what an evolution. Just that alone. Like that is that's pretty dope. So good work with that. So we what's the book you talked the timeline piece and different lives is part of this book. That's something that a lot of people I don't know if they want to talk about that or have a conversation about mm, different timelines or different lives. Do people have multiple lives? I would love your insight as to how you feel about the book that you wrote and in congruence with living, different lives.
I definitely wrestled with this myself very personally, just in the fact that like my mom had some of these like past life kind of experiences, and I was kind of like, nah, skeptic, right? Like, all right, bitch, like calm down, right? But then as life does, I was actually, I do a lot of self-guided meditation. This is something that I teach to my clients. I'm big on like, really being able to take the ownership through the meditation process and really being able to guide and rewire
Yeah,
yourself, right? It's part of that self-sovereignty piece is that, we learn from others and then we internalize and be able to create these results within ourselves. And so I was doing one of these self-guided meditations, and I was in a bathtub, which Matt is not recommended. Okay. You had to think these things through a little bit better, but for whatever reason, I thought I was a badass. So I was just going to do this in the bathtub, right? And so I was doing a self-guided meditation, I mean, very much around money. And in this experience, I like what you were talking about with your clients, like in utero. Okay. And I've never had an in utero like memory that has never happened before. And so
Mm.
I'm dropping into this and I'm hearing all of the voices around me, but can't really see. It's like muffled, blackish, brownish kind of,
Totally.
energy. And it took
Yeah.
me a second to like two and two, like, oh shit, I'm in a womb, right?
Yeah.
Once I figured that out, it was very strange. And so I was just sitting there like observing and watching it. And in this past life experience, right, which I determined was a past life experience because those were not my parents. The
Mm.
conversation that was happening outside of the womb was with people that were not my mom and not my dad. And so then I triggered and I was like, oh, this is a past life experience. But in that, the money mindset portion of this was that they were having a conversation about terminating the pregnancy, right? Because they
Totally.
couldn't afford it. So
Yeah.
in this construct, I was literally being deemed as worth less than money. So the worthless, right? Like separating those words. Linguistics matter, kids, right? Like
They
they call
do.
it spelling for a reason because
Your
they are
word is your wand. Yep. Totally.
very important. And so it wasn't worthless, it was worth less than money. Because in that past life memory, I remembered being aborted. And I mean it was
Mm.
extremely painful and extremely I mean just very like I don't use this word lightly. I never use this word, but it was very traumatic. And it was just something that really like through that meditation, I mean, I gained so much clarity, right? Of like knowing that one, like all of my feelings around worthlessness and the feeling about not being wanted, which I always kind of blamed on my parents,
Yeah.
wasn't coming from my mom. My mom wanted me. And like that changed the relationship dynamic I had with my mom and ultimately created a lot of acceptance around the lie, right? And like understanding from her point of view. And it really healed a lot of our relationship work with that. But in having that experience, I saw something differently where it was like, oh, I'm not just carrying what's happened from my birth forward, right? Like,
Yeah.
what if I'm coming in with a set of beliefs that I'm already carrying? And if I want to be able to rewire these things, I have to be able to explore beyond this lifetime to be able to unpack and process that file cabinet got a lot fucking bigger that day, right? Um,
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot more complex, but it also was a lot very comforting and cathartic in a certain way of knowing like, oh, there's more to this that I can see and like and also thinking of that what that means moving forward. And so lacing those pieces into the story is a challenge of the narrative to say that maybe the abuse that you're experiencing is not derivative of this set of parents, right? Maybe it is deeper than that. Maybe it is more of a soul life journey, and maybe it is something that we all eventually experience. And maybe it is a little bit more of a unification process than we realize.
I love this, and I love that you chose to do it that way. Because I, like you, felt I didn't know. Like similar to like what you said about your mom. You're like, okay, calm down. Like I had no I don't think I actually thought about past lives. It wasn't until, I got certified rapid transformation therapy in 2020, and then I did about 100 sessions, and about 100 sessions in, clients started going to past lives. And it was a very eye-opening situation for me. First, being like, what the fuck is going on? And then secondly, being like, can I actually do this with people? Am I qualified? So there was some enoughness around that. And of course, I went down a rabbit hole, found different certifications, and I did get certified and qualified to help people through these narratives and timelines. And it just opened up a whole different world for me too, and going through and doing my own past life work. Wild, wild, folks. We're not going to make this episode about that, but it's just something to put there. Of course, after you read Nicole's book, you may want to go on that adventure yourself, but it is important. And like you said, it just opens up it opens up everything that you think the things that you think you know about what is really going on in the universe, y'all, changes drastically when you start to have this different, when you start to go further down this whole thing. Um, so you wrote this book this way, and I love that. And so the book is about these different timelines, these different lives, these different progressions. what is the main why would somebody so someone's looking through the book aisle, why your book, Nicole? Why this book?
We kind of make the running joke that this thing should be sold with tissues, right? But this book is designed to create a very humanizing experience for you, to feel the feeling of being alive. If you've ever asked yourself the potentially very damaging question, what's the fucking point? This book is there to help you to explore what that means for you and to find the point and find the purpose of your existence through a little bit of a change in the lens of perspective. And yes, you will fall wildly in love with the characters, and there's something intentional within that is to you know how we take these fucking quizzes in entrepreneurial land. You got your quiz funnel, guys. You got your quiz
Yep.
funnel as well. Okay. So this book kind of functions a little bit as a quiz funnel. Based on which character you connect with, it really gives you a reflective state of your current narrative around relationship and what you're
Mm,
calling in right now as you go through that experience of which one of these people you gravitate towards. It will say a lot about you. It speaks volumes, as they say, which will help you to explore your construct and to, really look at what you're creating in your own life, but also what you're passing on in that lineage to your children and their children's children through this process. Because I'm asking something of the reader, and that was a risk in itself. But I'm asking the reader to change. I'm
mm.
asking the reader that no matter how good you think it is and how good you believe you are in all of those things, is there room for improvement? Is there something that you can contribute in this life that will help halt the systemic abuse that we all tolerate as a unification process? Abuse should not be a rite of passage, and it
Mm.
has become one. And that is something that I'm seeking to change. And I'm asking the collective energy, I'm asking the readers to help me with this because obviously I can't do that.
Do you feel like this is part of the new movement you're trying to create?
I feel like this is the new movement that I am creating,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the money ties into this, and running a successful business obviously gives you the self-sovereignty to make choices. So you don't have to stay in abusive relationships because you make your own fucking money, right? But it's also something that, it's the challenge of shifting from self-sabotage to self-sovereignty through self-worth and going through that process of becoming the person so that the next generation, I mean, that's what real generational wealth is.
Mm. So, if you had, well, actually, before we go to this one, where are they going to find this? I'm, of course, going to include all the ways to get your hands on this book, or at least pre-order the book, in the show notes below. Um, do we have ways to shout this out now, or are we going to have this funnel built at that? Like, how are we going to get this in their hands?
Yeah, the launch is June 3rd, right? So the book will be available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like all of the major outlets for this. It was really important for me to do some in-person stuff with this. So like we'll be doing a book tour that will be coming through. We're actually going to be doing a book club as well because I find this challenging topic needs some support. I think that this is going to open some doors for people that are going to be very emotionally challenging. And I think that it's irresponsible of me to write a book like this and release it into the world without offering the support lines. So we will form the book club piece of this, but also one of my programs will be specifically dedicated to helping people to have this experience and peel back the layers. So, obviously we'll be able to get it through any of my email worlds.
Yeah,
It will
yeah,
be out there. But this will be available on all major outlets starting June 3rd.
perfect. So if somebody was on the fence or just like, I guess, if somebody's stuck right now, like I want you to imagine the Nicole pre going to Bali. Like I'm talking rock bottom Nicole, or even the Nicoles, right? You've been hundreds of, I always tell my clients, you've been hundreds of thousands of women, right? And
Yes.
it's important to accept
Sometimes all at the same time.
sometimes all at the same time. And you're carrying when they're with it. Like something I do with a lot of my clients is I have them work on accepting that version of themselves so that they can heal. Like a lot of times we're rejecting that version of ourselves, right? And we're trying to avoid them. And I'm like, well, then how does that version of yourself feel? Right. And so it's calling in this version of yourself, and somebody that may be listening to this right now that is in that space, that is that version of themselves right now that is stuck in shame and worry and fear and uncertainty, what do you tell them?
Read this book as fiction. There's a lot of things that are hard, when it comes to self-help and admitting that you want to help yourself and picking up a book that is like, subconscious rewiring for dummies and sitting on a plane and reading it can carry some shame and can carry some guilt and can carry some just fear of the stigma of what other people are going to think of you. I definitely felt that way, is that I didn't need help. Um, so don't read it for help. Read it as a piece of fiction. Fall in love with the characters, go through the process, allow yourself to explore the main character energy of this, because one of the things that I intentionally did in this book is that you will never find a physical description of the main character, because the main character is intended to be you. And so go put her eyes on and see this world through her eyes and experience that through 3 lifetimes and read it as fiction, because subconsciously your mind will start to unpack that. Your mind will know better, know that this is not fiction, and will start rewiring all on its own to help to align you with a higher and better purpose, with what you deeply desire, and with the safety that you are subconsciously seeking, whether you can admit that to yourself right now or not.
Hmm. It's the book. I love this. Anything else before we wrap this up today, before we let them go buy this book?
I guess we'll tell them the title.
Yeah, oh yeah, we should. We got so deep that
I
that
know.
was like the furthest thing from
Bad
the.
marketers.
But, I think what you shared today was the most important thing. But yes, they do need to know the title of the book. What is the title of the book?
It's called A Shadow Called Sunshine.
Okay. So you're going to go out and buy this shadow called Sunshine, and like I said, I'll include it in the show notes, y'all. It'll go out to the list, and all of you will have a chance to get this. I'm excited to read it. Just a pleasure to have this conversation with you today, go down these different timelines and rabbit holes and all of that stuff. And I just want to thank you so much for being open and vulnerable. I know how important this is going to be to the world and the people that are in the spaces that really need this right now. I think we're in a very, very wild, tumultuous time in history. And I just love that you're bringing a book to the masses that is going to help create some healing across the timeline. So thank you so much, Nicole, for being you and writing this amazing book. And y'all go out and grab yourself a copy.
Thanks for having me, Matt.